We walked to the trading post, an old log cabin at the north end of the beach. The screen door slammed behind us. Canoes were overhead, bins of paddles, racks of waders, and stands of fishing poles and nets filled the floor, and they had live bait in big coolers. Two short aisles were stocked with canned goods and dry ingredients, pancake mix, potted venison, flour, coffee. I walked to the magnificent glass case with Indian artifacts, arrowheads, earthenware bowls, dolls dressed in beaded outfits, bolo neckties with turtle amulets, silver jewelry, agates, and other precious stones. I picked out 6 postcards from the circular wire rack and walked over to the young woman sitting behind the cash register. I put the cards on the counter and a dollar bill from my pocket, plus the nickel for tax. Without saying a word, she slipped my postcards into a glassine bag and handed it to me. I planned to keep the postcard of Kakagisik in his headdress for myself.
Thanks for listening to Read Minnesota Books. I'm your host, Deborah Copperrood. Jill Swenson is the author of The Land of Everlasting Sky, a memoir of loss and legacy on Lake of the Woods. She has one of the most eclectic bios I've read, so I'm just going to read straight from her website. Jill Swenson is a developmental editor and literary consultant who specializes in narrative nonfiction. She earned her MA and PhD from the University of Chicago and has 40 years of experience teaching, editing, and coaching writers. Tenured at Ithaca College as a journalism educator and media studies scholar, Jill left academia after 9/11 and lived off the grid for a decade in the Finger Lakes of upstate New York, farming and raising deer, elk, and bison. She has worked as a car mechanic, a Christmas wreath maker, and a lifeguard at a women's pool in Saudi Arabia. She has taught writing workshops at the Loft Literary Center, Grand Marais Art Colony, and currently online with Elephant Rock Writing Studio. Doesn't that make you want to read her memoir? Jill, welcome to Read Minnesota Books.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. I'm happy to have a Minnesota book, actually.
Yeah, me too. What is your connection to Minnesota?
Well, I was born here in Minnesota, and so were my parents and my grandparents. And I grew up in North Minneapolis and Robbinsdale. Well, we moved to Wisconsin when I was in high school, and I live here in Wisconsin now, but I still think of Minnesota as home. My sister lives in Stillwater, and I go up to Warroad and Lake of the Woods every summer.
Nice. Tell me about The Land of Everlasting Sky.
Well, it's a book about land in northern Minnesota, about 6 miles south of the Canadian border. It's the place where I spent summer vacations with mom's side of the family as a kid. It's where I remember picking wild blueberries, swimming at Lake of the Woods, seeing the northern lights, and meeting an old Ojibwe medicine man named Kakagisik. Kakagisik means everlasting sky in English. So the land of everlasting sky, it's his land that lies at the center of the story.
The structure of the book is, I would call it braided. There are chapters about your own personal history, your family. I really liked the chapters about your family's furniture store in North Minneapolis because I'm interested in the history of that area. And then these stories and vignettes show up in between the history of land near Warroad, Minnesota. And you became kind of obsessed with Kakegisic and this question of how Red Lake Nation came to build a casino on Allotment 3. How did you arrive at the final structure of the book and weaving these histories together?
Well, initially, I had no intention of writing this as memoir. Early outside readers of scenes from the history of Kakagisic and what happened to the land afterwards, right? People who read it said they didn't really know why they should care because they weren't sure why I cared so much. And that really required some critical self-reflection. So I wondered for some time whether it was even my story to tell. But all this time while I was doing the legal and historical research, I really got to know Don Kakagisic very well and the rest of his family. He had at times several siblings, several have passed since we began working, and his mother has passed. But getting to know them and figuring out how this transpired, I was also learning about my great grandparents and their homesteading and how the Red Lake Reservation had been diminished by almost half in 1902. And that's when my grandparents came in, is when it opened up to homesteaders. And so I began to really connect these dots between homesteads, reservation lands, why Kakagisic ever had this allotment. And I saw how the history of our two families, one immigrant and one indigenous, connected us through our relationship to land, to this place. And so that became the way I saw the story unfolding, is these two strands and how we're connected.
So originally, did you write a whole book or did you have like a proposal or an outline before you
I had
added in
just
the
started
memoir?
writing up sample chapters. It started with writing a piece for the Warroad Chamber of Commerce annual summer tourist brochure,
Oh, okay.
right? A profile of Kakagisic, because, I'm of a generation where some of the young kids don't know that local history anymore. And even though I don't live there, I thought I could make a contribution by writing up some of the research I had been doing. And I realized, oh gosh, this might go somewhere. So I began to share some of that writing with other writers. Um, that's how it began. And when Don and I started working together, I told him right from the start, I said, this might take 10 years. And it's taken 12. So it's a long process to find that final structure. But I think, the braiding together is about really our relationship to land. And that's really what the book is about.
Mm-hmm.
So I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to make that a very human story.
Yeah.
It's what puts the story in history, are the humans.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. So there's a scene where Kakegisic is on his deathbed. He's 124 years old. He speaks an Ojibwe dialect that no one else does, and you had a recording of it. And the written account in your book of that scene is so impactful. You write, telling the stories not to be forgotten in a language no one else spoke. I really admire journalists who can write scenes like this, even though they weren't there. And there's a lot of scenes like this in your book. How do you do it?
Well, I couldn't have done it without Don Kukiesic, and I'm incredibly grateful to him for giving me access to things like that audio tape recording, which Kakagiesik's nurse Virginia made of him during the night before he died, chanting. And, that was just an incredible thing to listen to. But, nobody can make sense of it these days. First of all, there's low volume, quality of the recording is low. But remember, Kakagisic was born in 1844. The language he learned then has changed. Any language changes over time, right? So
Mm-hmm.
the arcane language, there's also a different dialect on Lake of the Woods than there is on Red Lake Reservation. And three, most of the people at the time had been prohibited from using language and had been for more than two generations. So there weren't a lot of speakers who could hear that language and make sense of it. Um, you know, Don showed me all kinds of family photographs and documents and precious heirlooms, pipes, sacred objects. They were so forthcoming in helping me understand, what the story was about. And land is more than real estate, property. It's a spiritual matter.
Hmm.
So how did I do it? You're right. I was not in, three critical scenes when Kakagisic put his thumbprint on his will, the deathbed scene, and at his funeral. So how did I do it? I did it very carefully and with care for the people that I'm writing about. I immersed myself in all of the evidence from a wide variety of sources and perspectives. I was so lucky because there were eyewitness accounts, there were newspaper articles, there were book chapters written about these things, photographs, court depositions, legal documents, and a lot of archival evidence to reconstruct what happened. And it's much of the work that a historian does when they're writing narrative nonfiction history. But I'll tell you, in some ways, it's almost easier to write scenes like this than from my own experience, because there are limitations to first person point of view and to relying on memory, inherently flawed. Right? So building a scene from the historical evidence is almost easier for me than having to fact check my own memory and doubt my own ability to critically self-reflect and not write in service of my own ego. So, that how did I do that stuff where I'm not present in those scenes from the past? Um, yeah, I've had to learn how to write scenes of my own experience from working with that kind of historical material in the past.
Sure. Oh, that's very interesting. So did you, when you were writing your personal memoir portion, did you fact check? Did you talk to other
No,
people?
absolutely. And boy, my sister is the best fact checker. She has even a more ironclad memory than mine. And yes, I did fact check, and I also gave what I had written back to people I had interviewed and talked with. And, the Kakagisiks, well, both Don and Karen, who are still living, have read through the entire thing. And so has Bug, the granddaughter. So that, it's very helpful to get those corrections because on my own memories of, experiences, other people have other memories. And this is something I do when I'm writing scenes from history is I sometimes change point of view. I will go into first person and write it from one character's point of view because it helps me understand what's happening in that scene, in that historical moment, and switching those perspectives helps me reconstruct the scene. But when your own limitations are it's through your eyes only. And you bring so much through your own eyes to an experience that others see things differently.
Yeah.
And yeah, my sister and I, sometimes we laugh that we had different sets of parents because their memories can be so different. But on the factual matters, I credit my sister a lot for doing fact checking.
Oh, that's great that you had that resource. I like to ask writers, what do you like better, writing a first draft or revising what you've already written? For you, I'm going to add in research too, because this is so meticulously researched. What's your favorite part of the process?
Oh, now you threw me for a loop. I was expecting the either or option.
Oh, sorry, we can
Um,
stick to that.
okay, hands down, the funnest part is the research, right? That's the fun part. But you asked, what do I like better? And so like is an operative term. Um, I like both, but I really love creating something new. That generative stage, opening my blank composition book and pulling out my sharp pencil. And I write by hand. For me, that's much more efficient because I'm getting raw, stuff down on the page. And, I know as an editor that good writing becomes really good through rewriting and revision and editing, etc. But there's nothing, more exciting than that fresh take, dropping into a scene from a memory that you nearly forgot. And it's just so ripe in your mind, or figuring out a plot point and being able to write down, or, oh, here's what I'm talking about, just jotting something down. I'm known for keeping a notepad on the seat in my car, writing, taking notes that only I can read because they're
Mm-hmm.
just scribbled, right? But I know what I wrote down. Um, so I like that generative process. To me, that's where all the juice is.
Yeah. And who is your favorite Minnesota writer?
Okay, this is really the hard question. So Louise Erdrich is probably my favorite author who's still alive, but I confess I really do have a thing for Sinclair Lewis.
Mm.
Um, Main Street should have been the novel for which he won the Pulitzer Prize in 1930. I am convinced of that. He was too. But I think his novels like Elmer Gantry right now with Christian nationalism and King's Blood Royal with all of the incredibly, eugenics, white supremacist thinking. And then, of course, it can't happen here. It has happened here. I mean, these novels are so incredibly relevant to today, and they're all set in small town Minnesota towns with ordinary people that, pierce through our heart to get to our head. And that's why I love Sinclair Lewis.
Well, that's a good recommendation. Are you on social media? Where can folks follow you online?
I am on Substack and on Facebook, and I have a full schedule of events at my website, jilldswenson.com.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Jill, for joining me on Read Minnesota Books. I really appreciate you and your book.
Thank you so much. This was a joy.
Now for my recommendations. This one is a little obvious. It's summer, kids are out of school or almost out of school. Check your public library for events and summer reading programs. They are free, they are enriching, they are air conditioned. You can find story times, book clubs, craft projects, chess games, and more. Besides a pool or a beach, the public library is the best place to spend a hot summer afternoon. And that's the end of this Read Minnesota Books episode. Please take a moment to rate and review the podcast on your app. Thanks for listening.